Rick Smith.
So as I said from the beginning, I don't think we're going to hear. I don't think Trump's going to be impeached. I don't think he's going to be convicted. He's already been impeached a second time, and I think a second time you're going to see the Republicans let him get off the hook. There is some talk, however, of possibly moving towards something of a censure. I don't see that happening either. But good on Tim Kaine and Susan Collins for trying. But we'll see where it's going to play out. It's always fun and interesting to watch how Democrats shoot themselves in the toes. And here to share some thoughts on, which toes they get to keep this time around, I've asked our good friend Harvey Kaye to come talk with us. Harvey's an author and professor of democracy at the University of Green Bay, Wisconsin. One of his fabulous books, The Four Freedoms, one of my favorites. Harvey, thanks for taking time for us.
Always a pleasure for you, Rick. Thanks.
So, as I said at the beginning, I fear that the Democrats have already shot themselves in the foot because they've taken so long in this. This should have been done. This should have been done already.
Yeah. Well, Donald should have been done much earlier on, of course. But, go ahead. Sorry.
Well, now you've got all these. You had all but one Republican, let him off the hook the last time. I guess now all but five have pushed back on Rand Paul's point of order to have it set aside. So this is a glaring bit of going, he's going to get off of this.
It's amazing. So first McConnell said, he essentially incited the events. Now he's not so sure they should even go ahead with this whole trial. Rand Paul, who's to my mind a yo-yo, frankly, he's leading the opposition, and then he goes down onto the floor of the Senate without a mask on. I mean, these people they're shameful. They're just awful. These Republicans are awful. And the tragedy is that the Democrats just never seem to get their act together to effectively either bring an end to the Trump administration or literally drive these Republicans to the wall.
Yeah, but at the end of this, and I got to be honest, that my fear has been that Democrats will do what they've done in the past and not be able to drive the car. And when they finally get the engine started, they drive it into a ditch because there's a lot that needs to be done. And at the beginning, I gave Schumer a little bit of credit for not giving up on the rules of the Senate and giving McConnell some power. I'm thrilled about that. So I have some guarded optimism because I'm trying not to slip my wrists at this point, Harvey.
Look, this whole thing about I think the really big question is ending the filibuster. And, McConnell backed off demanding that they make some kind of pledge not to do it because he discovered that Manchin and Sinema are unlikely to go along with the idea of ending the filibuster. Are they so uncreative that they can't buy off two of their maverick senators? There's usually a way that you can work out a great deal. So, for example, Manchin's already said he favors, I think he actually made a remark to the effect of a $4 trillion infrastructure, program. And, that would really benefit West Virginia a lot. So can't Biden and Schumer and Pelosi work out a great deal that, they're going to raise everyone's income in West Virginia? There's got to be ways you can do this. The Democrats just utterly disappoint. I'm sorry, they just utterly disappoint me over and over again. Undeniably, however, the pandemic is the first issue. And if they run into trouble in trying to get more aid for Americans, then I don't know what to expect in the upcoming months at all.
Now, Schumer did say that everything's on the table and they may go right to budget reconciliation, I guess is how they would move this.
Yes.
And it's my view he should go to try and get a quarterly budget a quarterly vehicle like this so you can do it more than once a year.
Right.
But at the end of this, he's got that's the ultimate need right there. Now on the filibuster front, I've got a compromise. I'm all in favor of keeping the filibuster as long as you're willing to stand out there and hold the floor. This idea of you secretly putting a filibuster on something and then just dying is ridiculous. If you want to go all Jesse Helm or Strom Thurmond, you want to go all Strom Thurmond and spend 24 hours reading the phone book, God bless you. But then when you're done, when you can't hold it anymore and you got to run to the John, then we vote on the damn thing.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great idea. And I've been thinking about something along those lines as well. Most Americans mistakenly think the filibuster goes back to the time of almost the Continental Congress. But in fact, it's really an innovation of the post World War II period. So yeah, let's go back. Let's go back to what is that? Was that film Mr. Smith Goes to Washington,
Yep.
something like that?
Yeah.
Let them all pretend to be Jimmy Stewart in the Senate.
No, because as I've been saying, a couple of things. One, this goes back to the Jim Crow era. But two, more importantly, I think of all of the really decent legislation that could have gotten through, all of the labor legislation that could have moved our country forward. That didn't because, well, go back to the Clinton era. You had Bob Dole who filibustered the strike replacement bill. Well, the only damn reason I voted for Bill Clinton. And Bob Dole was able to single-handedly stop that himself.
Yeah,
that kind of stuff has to stop.
Okay, so I've got a plan. As long as you've got your filibuster plan,
Let's hear it.
I think the first priority beyond the pandemic. I mean, if you think about it in the old FDR terms, the pandemic effort will be the relief effort. The next things we need are reconstruction, reform, and recovery. And here's how I think it ought to be pursued. I think that the Biden administration really ought to go all out with the Democrats in the House and the Senate, especially with Bernie in the chair of the Senate Budget Committee, in favor of a massive, I mean, truly massive public works initiative. Okay. Now, the public works initiative, they should put into it something that they can come back to if the Republicans balk too much. And that is anyone involved in this massive public works initiative, whether they're public employees or under private contract, is guaranteed health care, period. That's first. The second thing is they're guaranteed collective bargaining rights. Let that be, if you like, the first effort to move in favor of the kinds of things you and I want to see. And then if it gets suppressed or pushed out of the bill before it gets enacted, then that's when Biden walks in and really uses the executive order. He can use the executive order to guarantee that anyone involved in the public initiative must have collective bargaining rights, and just make that as part of any federal contract. So I think there are ways to move ahead, and I think because of the fact that it would be a budget question, they could easily also use budget reconciliation for that.
No, it doesn't sound like a horrible idea. Maybe that $4 trillion infrastructure plan that Manchin wants, it could be a big part of that.
Right. And I'll add to that something that I think I've mentioned to you before off the air, and that is that kind of initiative will provide jobs for everyone who wants one. And that will also bring together inside of the project folks who probably, not only voted for Biden himself, but voted as Republicans for Trump. Not the kind of people who stormed the Capitol building, okay? But working people who voted Republican.
Yep.
And I think back to the 30s with Roosevelt and the way we transcended the crisis of the 30s, besides the politics and economics of it, was that Americans came together inside of Civilian Conservation Corps, Works Progress Administration, and the gigantic initiatives of the Public Works Administration. And that's the kind of thing we have to pursue, because we have to figure out a way not only to reconcile budgets, we have to reconcile the American people to recognize that they're Americans first.
Absolutely.
Not to be confused with America First, please.
Exactly.
Definitely.
But I've been saying this kind of stuff for years now. I'm somebody, and I've taken heat for it, who says that we shouldn't be giving out food stamps. We shouldn't be giving out welfare. There should be none of that. There should be jobs programs. If the private sector can't, or more likely won't, create enough good paying jobs where people are going to be able to support themselves, that's where the public sector has to step in. And with the kind of jobs that you're talking about, every community needs something. Every community has things that need to be rebuilt, people that need to be serviced. We could create those jobs and make them good, family sustaining, living wage jobs, not the kind of poverty jobs that the private sector keeps trying to shove down our throats. This way we would do a couple of things. Everybody would be able to have a job. Everyone would have the dignity of work. They'd be able to support themselves, and we wouldn't be ripped apart by pointing fingers and going, well, there's a welfare queen over there. We'd end all that nonsense.
Right. Oh, as a matter of fact, I left off the third key ingredient into this public works initiative. I'm glad you reminded me, essentially, and that is setting the minimum wage inside of this grand endeavor. I know they announced today $15 by 2025. I was tweeting. People called me crazy. I think there are others who've been saying similar kinds of things. 25 and 25. That is, we shoot for a $25 minimum wage in 2025. And more immediately, when the signs into law, this grand public works initiative, immediately anyone involved in that gets a $15 minimum wage right now, immediately.
So let me ask you obviously the questions are going to come with that. What do you do with the people who are making, I don't know, $16, $17 an hour now? Because the fear has always been not just raising the people at the bottom, but it's that ripple effect all the way up. The fear is that you're going to create mass inflation and that you're going to need a wheelbarrow full of cash to buy a loaf of bread.
Well, you know what? That's where Medicare for All comes in. Make everybody happy and healthy.
No, I'm with you.
I'm serious. I'm serious. I think the Democrats have walked into a crisis, and that the only way out of the crisis is that they embrace the principles that were in the Biden platform, even if the policies were not. Okay, there was reference to universal health care. Okay, I don't see any way to avoid that. Look, I mean, the idea of universal health care back in 1944, 85% of Americans wanted it. At the end of the war, there were serious initiatives and bills that became law that essentially were pushing for a full employment economy. You know, everyone talks about the Council of Economic Advisors because they look to see who's been appointed to it. The Council of Economic Advisors' original mission was a full employment economy. It's time we remember who we are, we remember what we've done, and the Democrats, even if they're not prepared to go all the way, let them at least endorse the principle of universal health care by way of a sense of the Senate vote. And look, I'm not arguing for what Jimmy Dore was proposing. I'm arguing for the stronger voices in the Senate, such as Bernie Sanders, who has already said he's going to be floating a number of bills, pushing a number of things through the Budget Committee that are not necessarily immediately endorsed by Joe Biden, but he's going to try to push him. And
I have no idea what Jimmy Dore said.
Okay, sorry. He was pushing that. He was demanding.
I don't even know who Jimmy Dore is, but
just as well. He's a podcaster and YouTuber who's got a huge audience, and he was targeting the squad that somehow they should demand that Pelosi call for a vote on Medicare for All in the House, and that if she failed to do it, that they push for her removal from the speakership. But of course, it was idiotic because of the fact that he was going after the most essential voices in the progressive movement inside of Congress. I mean, I don't want to go any further than that. It was.
Yeah, you've already wasted enough time for it. Thanks for bringing that up.
Right.
So now you talked about the first two. Go through the second two parts of your plan.
Well, no, in fact, so the point was that if you push this proposal, this grand public works project, then, as I was saying, you've got to be in a position that Biden is prepared by way of an executive order. Okay, I'm repeating myself a bit, but the whole point is that by way of an executive order, he's going to guarantee that anyone involved in the public works initiatives has that at least immediately a $15 minimum wage, is guaranteed a healthcare program, healthcare coverage, and also collective bargaining rights. And by the way, the only way to transcend all of this, and I've been saying this forever, is by way of reinvigorating and strengthening collective bargaining and labor unions. You know, I don't think people quite realize that the making of democracy in America was often a struggle. One, that the making of a decent American standard of living was by way of the labor movement. You know, the Great Depression of 1929, 1930, the early 1930s, was pretty much diagnosed as a problem of purchasing power because big business was making huge profits, but Americans could not afford to buy things. And similarly, we're entering into a phase now where our economy may well be all the more in trouble because there are going to be too many people who don't even have jobs to go back to.
Right.
We're going to have to create jobs. And I don't mean make work jobs. I'm talking about transformational jobs, nation building jobs that bring in healthcare to the workers, that bring in the minimum wage, that bring in collective bargaining rights. I mean, that's the project.
Yeah, so let me ask you this, because you keep bringing up collective bargaining rights, but you keep giving away everything that you collectively bargain over. We're going to have this high wage. Everyone's going to have health care. We're going to put all these things in. So what does collective bargaining do then? I mean, if we're in an era now where
you asked me about folks making $16 and $17.
Okay.
They're going to demand higher wages. Look,
Okay.
We're going into a year with a lot of contracts coming up. We're going to see, by the way, for the first time in many years, okay, we're going to see serious strikes throughout the American economy.
We are.
Okay. And what we definitely need to do is make sure that the original initiatives, the original intention behind the National Labor Relations Board, which was to place the government solidly behind workers' efforts to organize and bargain collectively, that's renewed. Okay, we've got, in essence, I say it's time to get rid of the Taft-Hartley Act of 1947.
No, I say that all the time. That's the minimum. I'll go back to the original intent of the NLRA, which doesn't give one single right to any employer. It gives all the rights to employees because they understood that the employers had all the rights. And this just kind of gave some balance to the equation. And it came about because of as you know as well as anybody, because of all the massive strikes that were going on. It was about industrial peace. It was about, hey, let's not have these bloody wars that go on in our backyard. Let's give a way to fix this. And maybe we got to go back to that.
Yeah, the term they used for that in the 1930s went back, in fact, I think into the 19-teens, but really became the law of the land with the NLRA is industrial democracy. Industrial democracy. I mean, to my mind, what progressives need to do is start using the words social democracy and industrial democracy. Start cultivating the narrative, start reminding Americans of the past.
No, there are most certainly lessons to be learned. Now, again, you had 4 pillars that you had moved on. I guess the 4 R's. You didn't get to.
Oh, sorry. Right. Thank you. Right. I misunderstood you when you said go back to the other 2.
I wanted to go back to the last 2 because you hit the first 2.
Okay. So relief. Okay. And the next one had to do with reconstruction, but the reconstruction would include decidedly real initiatives of reform. Collective bargaining, right back in there for workers. That's a major reform. You and I both know that. Look, again, I go back to the 30s. What were the 2 major reforms of the 1930s? National Labor Relations Act and the Social Security Act. In some fashion, we have to begin it. Look, even if we're not going to go Medicare for all right away, we've got to figure out a way to move it along. So I've been arguing in a number of venues that we need Medicare for all children, guaranteed universal health care for all children. And as they get older, they'll vote for Medicare for all. Okay.
Well, isn't that kind of where we almost are now with Medicaid? What is it? I think half of all the children in the country are born thanks to Medicaid.
Well, I don't want it to be Medicaid. I want it to be a national health care program that they're covered. I don't want it to be that you have to be poor to be covered. Okay. That's basically it. And then on top of that, there are other kinds of things. We need to strengthen the Voting Rights Act. Okay. We definitely need to strengthen the Voting Rights Act. In fact, we could go on and on, but basically, to my mind, first and foremost is the rights of labor, and period.
So we're
then, by the way, and notice I put recovery as the last of the R's, and I say that because in the 1930s, the way to recovery was through relief, reconstruction, and reform, and recovery will be a part of that.
So I guess now we got to go back to the beginning. Joe Biden began his administration last week. Give me really quick kind of your view on how those first couple of days rolled out.
Well, it's true. In one sense, I was immediately disappointed by the speech.
Yes,
I know everyone talked about it, unity. Frankly, I thought it was a very mediocre speech. He hit some points. In fact, the first couple of hundred words of the speech, and the way he presented them, I actually thought we were going to be in for a great radio show. For a brief moment, he sounded like the beginning of I don't expect people to know who it was, but of a Norman Corwin radio production of the late 1930s and 1940s. Fabulous radio, because there was something in his voice. It was strong, and he was ready to go. The problem was that he didn't go. It became a repetition of the unity theme without telling us how we're going to create that unity. And now to explain to you what I mean. Yes, there was the reference to Lincoln, all well and good. It was something of a misrepresentation. Lincoln faced a civil war, and he fought a damn good civil war. We're not looking to do that right now, okay? But I was surprised, given the crisis we face and the times he had dropped the three letters FDR in the past year, that perhaps he should have been talking about FDR and how we might well emulate the New Deal and, again, the things I was talking about a little while ago in terms of labor. And moreover, there was no reference to labor. Extremely disappointing, okay? So unity was talked about, but not solidarity. And then the last thing that disappointed me, again, when I base it on the Roosevelt years, is the fact he didn't tell us how we're going to go beyond confronting the pandemic. Again, the kinds of things we were talking about. But then in the course of the 24 hours, in fact, even as he was giving that speech, I think they had already issued the ultimatum to that Peter Robb, that's his name, right? Who was the senior counsel at the National Labor Relations Board, a real corporate hack, a guy who was involved in Ronald Reagan's firing of the Patco workers back in 1981. And by the way, this is the 40th anniversary of that confrontation and that strike and those firings.
August 4th.
And it was wonderful to find out that they told him, resign by 5 o'clock or we're going to fire you. Well, that told me something. That told me that somewhere in that Biden administration, they've got labor in their minds, and that was a good sign. And then if you like, the cherry on top was the story that appeared and it was a fairly lengthy story in the Washington Post, that Biden, as we would hope, redecorated, that's the way to put it, the Oval Office. And he had busts of prominent figures of the past, many of them progressives, but most significantly, especially in light of the fact that there was no reference to FDR in the speech, there's now a prominently displayed portrait of FDR, and apparently displayed in such a way or hung in such a way that everyone in the room, especially the man who sits in the desk, the command desk, sees that portrait every single day. So I'm hoping maybe, just maybe, Biden will have FDR whispering in his ear.
That is the hope. But here's the thing: I don't beat him up for not mentioning FDR, because outside of you and a handful of others, this generation's not really learned that history. So I think that he's going to be his own guy. But if FDR is whispering in his ear, which would not be a bad thing to happen, maybe we get some good stuff out of it.
Well, let me put it this way. If you can mention Lincoln, who was the greatest president of the 19th century, you make a terrible mistake if you don't mention FDR, who was the greatest president of the 20th.
Excellent point. Last question I've got for you. Clearly, long way to go. Are we okay with? I mean, because you've been really, really down so far on the Biden administration. Are we hopeful at this point that maybe things are going to go in a good direction, or is this all bad?
Okay, here's what I say. I've never used the word optimistic in this
You never
moment.
have.
Okay, but I can tell you I am still hopeful.
Hopeful.
I am hopeful, and I'll tell you what really gives me the most hope. And I can't tell you how thrilled I am that Bernie is the chair of the Senate Budget Committee. That, to me, is so important. And so therefore, as chair of the Senate Budget Committee, he's not going to let things slide.
There you go.
Slide.
Good stuff. Harvey, as always, I appreciate the conversation. Good stuff, my friend.
Thank you, Rick. Always great to see you.
You too. Our good friend Harvey Kaye. Make sure you check out his book, The Four Freedoms. If you don't know about FDR, that will teach you. That will be a good start. We'll get links out on how you can take a look at that. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people from the top.
Waving the flag of freedom for people, not corporations. Rick Smith.